War. It's a crucible that tests humanity to its limits, and sometimes far beyond. It forges heroes, yes, but it can also unleash unimaginable horrors. For over 2 decades, I've chronicled the stories of conflict, seeking to understand not just the battles fought, but the human cost paid. Today, we journey back to a dark chapter, not just of the Vietnam War, but of American history, a chapter many tried to forget, to bury. We go to a small hamlet in Quang Ngai Province, Vietnam, a place known to the world by a name that has become synonymous with atrocity: My Lai. Imagine a village, not a military stronghold, a village of mothers, children, old men, unarmed. Now imagine them systematically gunned down by soldiers sent to protect, to liberate. How does such a thing happen? And perhaps more importantly, how does it stay hidden? This is the story of the My Lai massacre and the courageous few who refused to let the silence win. Section 1. The setting. A war on edge. The year is 1968. The Vietnam War is a raging inferno. Just weeks before, the Tet Offensive had shattered any illusion of a swift American victory. U.S. forces were reeling, casualties were mounting, and paranoia was a constant companion. Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, 11th Brigade of the Americal Division. They were, by many accounts, an average group of American GIs. Young men, far from home, thrust into a brutal counterinsurgency war where the enemy was often indistinguishable from the civilian population. Intelligence reports, later found to be tragically flawed, suggested that the village of Sun Mai, a cluster of hamlets, including My Lai 4, was a Viet Cong stronghold. Charlie Company was ordered to neutralize it. The briefing given to the soldiers was aggressive. They were told to expect heavy resistance, that all civilians would have left for the market, and that anyone remaining was either Viet Cong or a sympathizer. Captain Ernest Medina, the company commander, reportedly told his men, "This is your chance to get revenge for losses suffered by the company in previous weeks due to booby traps and sniper fire." The orders, though never explicitly stating "kill unarmed civilians," were ambiguous enough and delivered in an atmosphere electric with a thirst for retribution to be catastrophically misinterpreted. Section 2, March 16, 1968, The Descent into Madness. As dawn broke on March 16, 1968, helicopters carrying Charlie Company descended upon My Lai 4. What they found was not a fortified enemy battalion, but a peaceful village waking up. Farmers heading to their fields, women cooking breakfast, children playing. No enemy soldiers, no hostile fire. Yet, the killing began almost immediately, and it was systematic. It was brutal. It was a massacre. Survivors, like Mrs. Truong Thi Lei, who was a young girl then, recall the terror. She hid under the bodies of her family members, pretending to be dead, as bullets rained down. Old men were bayoneted. Women and young girls were sexually assaulted before being killed. Babies were shot in their mother's arms. Lieutenant William Calley, a platoon leader, was at the forefront of the violence. Witnesses described him ordering his men to push dozens of villagers into a ditch and then machine gunning them. The official U.S. Army estimate would later state that over 347 unarmed civilians were killed. Vietnamese sources say the number was 504. Section 3. The hero of My Lai, Hugh Thompson. But amidst this depravity, a flicker of extraordinary courage emerged. Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson, Jr., a helicopter pilot on a reconnaissance mission, flew over My Lai that morning. With him were his door gunners, Specialist Lawrence Colburn and Specialist Glenn Andriotta. From the air, Thompson saw the unthinkable: American soldiers firing on unarmed civilians. He saw bodies piling up in a ditch. He quickly realized the horrifying truth. In an act of almost unbelievable bravery, Thompson landed his helicopter between advancing American troops and a group of terrified Vietnamese civilians hiding in a bunker. He ordered his gunners to train their M60 machine guns on the American soldiers, with instructions to fire if the GIs harmed the civilians. Think about that. An American pilot threatening to fire on his own countrymen to save the lives of those they were supposed to be fighting for, or at least protecting. Thompson then personally coaxed the civilians out of the bunker and airlifted them to safety. He and his crew are credited with saving at least a dozen lives that day. Glenn Andreotti tragically died in combat 3 weeks later. Thompson's radio reports of a mass murder were initially ignored or downplayed by his superiors. Section 4. The Cover-Up and the Whistleblower. The horror of My Lai didn't end on March 16th. What followed was a concerted effort by elements within the U.S. Army to cover up the massacre. Official reports falsely claimed a significant victory against Viet Cong forces, with only around 20 civilian casualties attributed to crossfire. For over a year, the truth remained buried, but whispers of the atrocity reached a young soldier named Ron Riddenhauer. Riddenhauer hadn't been at My Lai, but he heard graphic accounts from soldiers who were. Haunted by what he heard, he took it upon himself to investigate after returning to the United States. Riddenhauer wrote letters detailing the allegations to President Nixon, the Pentagon, State Department officials, and numerous congressmen. Initially, his letters were met with silence or dismissal, but he persisted. He was a man driven by conscience. Finally, his letters, combined with the relentless efforts of investigative journalist Seymour Hersh, broke the story to the world in November 1969. The graphic photographs taken by Army photographer Ronald Haberle were published, shocking the American public and the world. Section 5. Accountability and Aftermath. The revelations sparked outrage and fueled the anti-war movement. The Army launched an official investigation known as the Piers Inquiry. Dozens of soldiers were implicated, but ultimately only Lieutenant William Calley was convicted of premeditated murder. Calley was sentenced to life in prison, but his sentence was progressively reduced. He ultimately served only 3.5 years under house arrest. For many, Calley became a scapegoat, while higher-ranking officers largely escaped serious punishment. The My Lai massacre had a profound impact. It eroded public support for the Vietnam War, raised disturbing questions about the conduct of American soldiers, and highlighted the dangers of dehumanizing the enemy. It forced a reluctant nation to confront the darkest possibilities of what its sons could do in the name of war. Decades later, the survivors of My Lai still live with the trauma. In 2009, William Calley publicly apologized. Section 6. Lessons and Legacy. So, what do we take away from the ashes of My Lai? First, the critical importance of leadership and clear ethical orders. Second, the power of individual conscience. The actions of Hugh Thompson, Ron Riddenhauer. Third, the insidious nature of cover-ups and the necessity of a free press and whistleblowers to hold power accountable. And finally, My Lai serves as a stark and enduring warning about how easily ordinary people can be led to commit extraordinary evil. It reminds us that the capacity for good and evil resides within all of us. Remembering My Lai is not about dwelling on the shame of the past for its own sake. It's about learning, reflecting, and recommitting ourselves to the principles of justice, humanity, and accountability. It's about ensuring that such atrocities are never repeated, anywhere, ever again.